Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. My name's Joel Betts. I'm a conservation planner with the Worcester County Conservation District and part of the Greater Quabbin Food Alliance Food Waste and Compost Working Group or Food Waste Reduction and Composting Working Group. And this is the Food Waste Solutions for Businesses webinar. We've got other folks on the call who are going to be your experts in food waste reduction for businesses and restaurants. And just as a brief introduction to Zoom, we have everyone's audio muted automatically. Please keep yours muted and your video off during the presentation if you can. We are recording it, so if you don't want your video to show up or if you're not okay with that, you can watch the recording later, or you can turn your video off throughout. We're going to have a question and answer section at the end that I'll be moderating. Please put questions in the chat as they come up and I'll organize those. You can also chime in with video and audio at the end, that way in the Q&A. And we'll email links to this recording and the presentation slides to all the attendees afterwards, and we'll make them available on the Worcester County Conservation District website and our YouTube channel. So we're excited to have that be a resource for you to share with anyone else who's interested. Today's agenda, we're going to start with Rick Innes of Clearview Composting, who's an expert long-term composter. He owns a medium to large scale composting operation. He's going to talk about food waste in general and his experience with that. And then we'll have Christy Smythe-Berry, who is part of Recycling Works in Massachusetts and the Center for Ecotechnology, and is an expert in helping businesses adopt composting practices. And then we'll have Amy Donovan from the Franklin County Solid Waste Management District to talk about compost program logistics and successful models for composting as a business or as a restaurant. And then we'll wrap up again with Rick talking, kind of contextualizing it again, and we'll have all three of them available, as well as myself, for the question and answer section at the end. So without further ado, I will also thank our other partners, the Mount Grace Land Trust, which hosts the Greater Quabbin Food Alliance. We have a few of those people on the call today. And then, just to tell you a little bit about ourselves, we are a conservation district that services Worcester County with agricultural assistance. Our focus is soil health. We help people with gardens, improving their soil, rain garden, incorporating native plants into rain gardens, helping farmers address conservation concerns on their farm. And then Drawdown Montague is another partner that is focused on solutions to climate change locally, and has invested a lot in this composting working group. So yeah, without further ado, I'll leave it to Rick Innes, who will be giving the first part of this talk.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to just try to give a little bit of an overview in terms of sort of what the bigger picture is of this whole issue of food waste, and why it makes so much sense to make every effort we can make to divert it from landfills and incinerators in particular. Well, just a couple of statistics to begin with, and a sort of a really general overview. It is estimated that in the United States, 30 to 40% of all the food that is produced ends up being wasted at one point or another in the whole cycle of food waste, food production and consumption and so forth. And that's a really staggering number. Another statistic that I have seen regularly is that in the residential waste stream at this point, after accounting for what is diverted from more conventional recycling efforts, glass, metal, plastic, etc., that food waste could be as much as 23% or more of the remaining residential waste stream. very large numbers. I mean, these, the percentages vary a little bit depending on whether you're talking about weight or volume, but they're large numbers regardless. And another statistic that boggles my mind, the estimated value of all the food that is wasted in the United States is $165 billion. That's the value of the food waste. That doesn't even begin to talk about the cost of managing it as waste. And one of the things that we're going to try to convey in this webinar today is that while managing food waste in the alternative ways that we're going to suggest does cost money, it's often less than it would ultimately cost to dispose of it as waste in a landfill or an incinerator. And it's certainly environmentally much better. So that's something we hope everybody takes away from this. I guess in terms of the environmental impacts, before I jump on to some other statistics, the major environmental impact of food waste going into a landfill is that in a landfill environment where there is no oxygen, you get anaerobic breakdown, which is both unpredictable and produces an unpredictable mix of carbon dioxide and, even worse, methane, both of which contribute to climate change. And so, in my mind, landfilling food waste is the worst possible thing that could happen, and incinerating it, frankly, is not much better. Jumping ahead to a couple other statistics in terms of what the current food waste situation means. It's been estimated that the amount of food that is wasted is possibly responsible for as much as 21% of all the fresh water that is consumed in the food production cycle, 18% of all cropland, 19% of all fertilizer, and if it all goes to landfill, it contributes to 21% of all the landfill volume that is being used up, which is a statistic that should alarm all of us in Massachusetts, since we are literally running out of landfill space as we speak. So anyway, those are some overview things. We're going to be mostly talking today about, and certainly in terms of what I'll be talking about later, we're going to be talking about composting mostly, but we did want to give people an understanding that there is a whole hierarchy of methods that can be used to reduce the amount of food waste. And this has been around for a long time. The slide that we've got up, I think, if it's up at this point, is the current EPA hierarchy. And the way I present it is a little different from what's on the slide, but it'll track pretty well. Because there are a whole series of steps that people can take to address food waste reduction, and they all should be considered for any opportunity that can be taken. Obviously, the very first thing, and as with any recycling and waste management issue, is reduction of the amount of waste being generated. In the case of food waste, that just mostly amounts to good planning and not producing more material, than you need to. Trying to really target your production to the actual real demand. Beyond that, a lot of food waste, when it's categorized as waste, it's still perfectly consumable. And so opportunities should always be sought to divert wasted food to human consumption, soup kitchens, food banks, etc. can handle that. There are a variety of ways, as long as the material is fresh enough and has been managed carefully enough to make it safe. That's a good way to go. After that on the hierarchy in my mind is diverting other food waste to feed animals like hogs and chickens and so forth. I'm going to have a couple examples of that later on in the later part of my presentation. There are other industrial uses for some types of food waste, notably oils and fats and so on are often diverted. And then a growing use is anaerobic digestion, which digests the material to produce actually methane for generating electricity and or heat, to get some benefit that way. And I should mention that one of the benefits of that process when it's available is that the digestate, as it is called, the residue that's left after the digestion process, is in fact compostable, so that can move right on to the next step in the hierarchy, which is composting. And food waste is really almost an ideal ingredient in composting. It adds so many nutrients, and almost all food waste in a commercial setting can be composted. So that's very much something to keep in mind. And then at the very bottom of the hierarchy is landfilling and incineration. And it's my personal goal, hopefully by the time I retire, to see us get a long way toward getting the amounts going to those last two down to very close to zero. So I think that's all I was going to cover on this section.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. The last slide we had here for you is just a reminder that whatever you can do is a step in the right direction, which I'll talk a little bit more about in my section.
Yes. Yeah, I guess, that I should just say, in my mind, that's another important underlying part of our message today, is just that, we're talking about a big problem here, both, in terms of society in general and often for many individual businesses. And it's not necessary to get obsessed with solving the whole problem all at once. I think a big part of our message is solve it a step at a time, or two steps at a time, or whatever works at a particular time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rick. I am Christy Smythe-Berry, and we'll hear from Rick again a little bit at the end. We're going to do a case study example on his composting operation, and he has a couple customers that he'd like to highlight as examples of successful systems. My name is Christy. As I mentioned, I am with the Center for Ecotechnology, and we administer a number of waste and energy reduction programs across the state, including the Recycling Works in Massachusetts program, which is funded by the Mass DEP. So I'm mostly going to be talking about our Recycling Works resources today. Recycling Works primarily offers free assistance for businesses and institutions. So any business or institution across the state has access to these free resources of information, guidance. We provide direct technical assistance. Our waste technician in that picture, Heather Billings, is actually on the call today. I saw her pop in. So hi, Heather. I think we've been using this slide of her for many, many years now. So. Yeah, it's a phenomenal resource, and especially for businesses that have food waste that they are wanting to reduce and figure out how to do that. I like to joke sometimes that we're the experts, so you don't have to be. And like Rick wanted to be sure to mention, we pride ourselves on our phrases, meeting businesses where they are. So we like to, well, let me put it this way. If it doesn't work within your existing operations, it's not going to be sustainable for you, and therefore it is not a sustainable solution. period. So it is our job to find solutions that truly work within your system. So I am going to show a case study right now, and give me one moment because I did not pull that up ahead of time and I should have. Give me 2 seconds to find it and I will play it for you.
In those 2 seconds, shall I do this poll?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So we have one poll for you quick. I'll just launch that. What is your main source of food waste material at your place of business, if you have a place of business? And you can fill that out while she's pulling that up. This is Joel from WCCD. Those answers are coming in.
Excellent.
And this will be helpful for us just to know, who's here. So thanks to everyone for being here. A couple people hopped on late.
You don't have one that says anything about a farm.
Hi, Mike. You're right. Well, we appreciate that you're here representing the farming community.
Closest is going to be that.
All right. Well, it looks like that might be. Oh, there's one more response.
It's about
Oh,
everybody.
there we go.
Great. I'll
Excellent.
end and share those results. So we've got. Go ahead, Christy.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, it looks like one distributor or food retail business, one restaurant or other food service business, a number of folks with office food of various sorts, which is great because I feel personally like that's one area that often gets overlooked. And someone who says, I don't think we have any, and I'll be interested to know if you feel the same at the end of this presentation, at the end of this webinar, as you do now about that. Great. Well, thank you so much. And I will put on our case study. Can you hear that, by the way? No. Okay, hold on one second. There we go.
A restaurant has tremendous potential for creating a mess in the environment with lots of trash and bottles and garbage and smells and everything. And I just don't like it. I'm in this nice downtown neighborhood and I want to smell good and look good and do the right thing without going broke, of course.
We worked with the Devon's Eco Efficiency Center on a special project to increase food diversion from restaurants in the Devon's area and surrounding towns. And we worked with the Gardner Ale House to set up their food waste diversion program that is going for animal feed.
We don't just take a plate and scrape it into a bucket. We take a plate and we scrape it into 3 buckets just as quickly as we scraped it into 1 bucket.
Composting is very easy. It's just as easy as throwing stuff away, essentially. It doesn't really add any extra time to our day.
We also calculated costs and benefits of diverting the food out of the trash so that the restaurant would have an idea of costs and benefits.
Your group found this hauler up in New Hampshire called Glenn W. Shaw. He has like 7,000 pigs, and I'm sure he got into the hauling just to support the pigs. I don't think he was a hauler to begin with. You'd think, that maybe they would pay you for it, but it doesn't quite work that way just yet. You have to pay them. But in the end, it all works out because there's far less garbage and stuff going into the trash. And dry trash hauling is very expensive. So if you can decrease your trash by diverting your food scraps, it makes a lot of sense. It's a good deal for him and it's a good deal for me.
I think it's pretty awesome that our company takes care of that kind of stuff and has interest in that kind of stuff. We're really not very wasteful at all here, and I just think it's a nice effort to put in.
Of course, there's resistance with this kind of a program. In the beginning, right, everybody was doing it one way, and they complain a little bit the first couple of weeks, but now they would complain if we went back the other way. It's just that much easier. And the dishwashers bring what we call the pig buckets around here, very affectionately the pig buckets. They come down here with just a 5-gallon pig bucket, dump it in there, close it up. How many flies do you see there? No flies. So we've gradually moved in this direction of having more volume in recyclables in general than we do in trash. And right behind me here is our only trash dumpster, which is a 6 cubic yard dumpster, and such dumpster, yes, such trash. Stop.
All right, so going back to our presentation. There we go. So there was a lot of great info in there, including some info on food waste bans, which we'll talk about actually in just a moment. Some mention about cost, and I can say fairly confidently, first of all, everyone's situation is very different. What Rick asked, we're low on landfill space in our state. Waste trash costs are going to keep increasing, and categorically, usually, if you divert materials to recycling or composting or some other outlet than trash, then you're going to save costs. And especially if we get to that first bit on that hierarchy, which is the source reduction, conservation of materials is always smart business, because you will always lose less money if you are throwing less of that money of stuff that you bought away. So real quick, I'm going to go through just a couple details about our waste system in Massachusetts from the perspective of the Recycling Works program. We have a number of waste bans. You may or may not know that these are materials that commercial entities are required to throw away, or sorry, required to divert from trash, required to recycle or compost and not throw in the landfill. Heather had mentioned in that video the commercial food waste ban, which at the time was first being introduced at a threshold of 1 ton a week or more. That is going down. The DEP is working on their 2020-2030 solid waste master plan, and that is reducing that threshold to 0.5 ton. So going forward, any business that produces 0.5 ton or more of food waste in any given week is required to divert that material. And our assistance helps with that. We have a number of resources available. So with our assistance, you have access to our website with a database of haulers and outlets. You have access to us as individual guides to help you find whatever information you're looking for. We have source reduction guidance, hauler contracting guidance, all sorts of things that I'll mention a little bit more in a moment. This is our food waste estimator. So if you're not sure how much food waste you might be producing, this is the restaurant sector that I have up here right now. So this shows, for example, based on a lot of data, if you serve, for every 1 meal you serve, if you're a full service restaurant, you waste approximately 1 pound of food per meal. If you have 10 employees, you can, and again, for full service, you can estimate that you're wasting about 3,000 pounds a year per employee, and so on and so forth. On the right there, that list are the other sectors that we have worked out. So if you're in any of those sectors and you'd like to know how much food waste you are probably producing, you can take a look at those, and it'll have different numbers for those different sectors. For the many of you who said that you mostly have office food waste or waste from meetings, that might not be on there specifically, but we would be happy to help you figure that out if you'd like. And part of this food waste ban is the DEP. I feel fairly proud to say that here in Massachusetts, we are pretty good, and I know that there are probably lots of people who will disagree with this statement, but at least for these things with regards to the waste bans, we are fairly good at not creating a ban unless there is a place for that material to go. And in this case, this is a map of all of the sites that accept diverted food material in Massachusetts. So pretty much anywhere you are in the state, with the exception maybe of the Cape, but there's starting to be more and more options there, you have access to sites that accept that material and haulers that will transport that material. There are still a few pockets that are a little bit less covered than others, but we're constantly working on filling those in. And certainly if you have any questions, let us know, and we'd be happy to help find an outlet for you. Other materials, like I mentioned, that are on our site, we have tip sheets, we have materials guidance for specific materials, we have best management practices for different activities and different sectors. And then, like I said, our food waste estimation guide. This tip sheet is one of my favorites. I used to run events, and This one is a tip sheet for waste reduction at workplace events. So this can include your annual party or your weekly board meetings or monthly shareholders meetings or whatever it is where you have catered food. And we also offer signage and staff training documents and all sorts of other resources like that. This is an example of some of the signage that we offer, which we can customize slightly. We talked about the hierarchy, so I'm just going to touch a little bit on the first two of these, the source reduction and the feeding hungry people parts. First of all, for just some basic source reduction guidance. So source reduction is where that reducing what you're producing in the first place comes into play. So at a restaurant or in food service, in the front of house, in the back of house, you can use different techniques to reduce wastage. For front of house wastage, smaller portions, doing tasting plates to get an idea of what customers actually want. Other things just to make sure that the food that's going out is actually getting consumed. Back of house, this is a great example of someone slicing up a bunch of cucumbers. Those cucumber peels could be used in another dish rather than being tossed, so on and so forth. There is some great technology recently like Food, PHOOD, and Lean Path, where you can set up an iPad and a scale and actually note what the material is and weigh how much of it to see exactly what you are wasting and how much. And I know that for a lot of our customers that we've worked with, that has been enlightening to say the least. And then purchasing and management. So most small restaurants, in my experience, are pretty dialed in when it comes to using what they purchase with regards to food material. You only buy what you're going to use and you use whatever you have. But as you start getting bigger, or depending on what the company is, you might see that you might not know, and this is where that knowing what you're wasting comes into play. You might not know that you're buying more lettuce than you actually end up using, or you're buying more this, that, or the other, or your portions are really big, so half of every one of that particular dish is not getting eaten, and so on and so forth. And that's also where donations can come into play at the management side of things. And then signage and training. So just having a logical process that makes it easy for for your staff to follow it can go a really long way. And I want to say quickly about food donation. A lot of people are worried about liability for food donation. So I wanted to say that there is an act called the Emerson Good Samaritan Act that protects anyone who is donating food in good faith. So if you as a donator know that that food has been handled safely thus far and is still safe to eat as far as you know, you are not to be held liable for that donation. And furthermore, as far as we know, no one has ever been sued for food donation issues. So it hasn't happened, and it seems to be a concern that stops people from donating that isn't really a concern, and where you do have protections in place. And we can also help with the logistics of food donation. There are so many food donation organizations that try to make it as easy as possible for you to do that. Like they'll coordinate pickup with you and come get it from you, so you don't have to do anything extra. And then a lot of those materials, if they're kept to time temp, for example, if you're putting out smaller portions for display and keeping more of it either heated or cooled, depending on the material, then that remaining portion that is not eaten remains food safe and can be donated or can be used to be made into other meals. So those are just some quick tips with that. I kept this in here just as an example of some of the back of house strategies that we can help you figure out what different materials you have, where those different materials are going, how often you need your bins picked up, how many bins you need and what type, and how all of those logistics are going to make the most sense for your company. This is just a quick shot of our website. This is the technical assistance page that has that picture of Heather on it again. And then I'm moused over the food waste tab on this page. If you go to the About Us tab, there are a bunch more case studies if you want to see a lot more successful stories. But under the food waste tab, here's some more info on the organics waste ban, the food waste estimation guide, source reduction, donation, separation guidance. And we also do compost site technical assistance. So mentioning our farm representative who is here. If you are a farm, if you are already composting and are interested in accepting food waste from external generators at a commercial level, we can also assist with that through the Recycling Works program, all in the sort of this broader approach of trying to facilitate the process of food waste being diverted from landfills. So This is my information. If anyone has any questions, we'll have a poll at the end asking if you're interested in additional follow-up, which one of us will be able to follow up with you. So once we get to that poll, feel free to mark on there if you'd like a little bit more information. We'd be happy to reach out to you. Email me anytime, call me anytime if you have any questions, and I can get you to the right place. And that includes, just to give a little plug for our energy work as well. If you have any questions about energy reduction at your business, I can help get you to the right place for that too. And with that, I'm going to introduce Amy Donovan of the Franklin County Solid Waste Management District, who is going to take over sharing. And I'll be back again for the Q&A at the end.
Thank you, Christy.
My pleasure.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes, I can.
Mhm.
Okay, and everyone, and you can see my presentation.
Looks good.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some success stories and give some examples and pictures of current and past businesses that are doing a great job managing food waste. So my organization is Franklin County Solid Waste Management District. Our headquarters are in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and we have 21 member towns. Franklin County is kind of a large rural county, and we've got a lot of composting going on here in our county. Now, this is an old picture of Martin's Farm, so my apologies for that, but I wanted to include this picture because it shows the wide open nature of our compost facilities. We have lots and lots of compost programs going on here in Franklin County. Commercial and municipal composting, just in case anyone doesn't know what that is, it's a type of waste management that accepts all types of food waste, including meat, bones, and dairy, things you wouldn't compost at home, plus paper waste such as paper towels, napkins, compostable paper, and compostable plastic to-go containers and other kinds of tableware, small amounts of wood, all kinds of organically based materials. So here in Franklin County, we have 19 transfer stations total, and 11 of them are offering free food waste drop-off to their residents or permit holders. And those folks are able to reduce trash for their household. We have 30 school compost programs at public and private schools. Most of the students in the county are engaged and trained in separating food waste from trash and recyclables. And those schools have major programs, many of them off-site, coming here to Martin's Farm. The Franklin County Solid Waste District assists events in recycling and composting. I have a few examples at the end of my slides. So these events are able to compost all the food and paper waste that is generated at their events. Plus restaurants, markets, food factories, everybody's composting in Franklin County. So at the bottom of the slide, I've got a picture of a Triple T compost dumpster, and I want to thank Triple T Trucking for really pioneering a lot of the composting that's going on here in Franklin County. They have a great arrangement with Martin's Farm. They have trucks that tip those 2 and 4 cubic yard containers, which are all over this county, into what is called a front load garbage truck, compactor truck. And that material is brought to Martin's Farm pretty much 5 days a week. Well, from this region, maybe 3 days a week. So we have pretty dense routes, and Triple T Trucking is a great example of a compost hauler that's making it happen. They service accounts from Brattleboro down to the Northampton area and beyond. So if you're someplace in Western Mass listening to this, you might be able to get service from a compost hauler that will bring the material to Martin's Farm or elsewhere. At Martin's Farm, they employ a few different strategies to keep that material cooking. This is what's known as hot composting. It's different than what happens in your backyard compost bin because the volume and methods that are employed here are are combining together to make a real hot compost. At the bottom of the screen on the left, I've got a picture that I took of a compost thermometer that is sunken into one of these windrows, and it shows 140 degrees. That is just an average kind of temperature that these windrows attain, but they do get up to 150 degrees for about 5 days, and that's what really helps kill weed seeds, pathogens, and other things that make people worry. So this composting process lasts 3 to 5 months, and it does kill pathogens and weed seeds and produces a very, very nice end product. Compostable tableware. So one of the questions that we already received was how to make the jump from back of the house composting in a restaurant to front of the house, which means the dining room where people are sitting. And one way to make that successful is to only serve on compostable tableware or reusable, so that there aren't little plastic trash condiment cups that are ending up in your compost. So also staff training, of course. So I just want to talk briefly about compostable tableware. First of all, there have been many improvements over the past 10 to 15 years in this area. And currently there are many, many brands that can be found that are truly compostable. And the way to find out if something is truly compostable is to look for certification. Now, an ASTM 6400 certification tells you if it's really compostable or not. But the organization BPI, Biodegradable Products Institute, has taken it a step further, and they have worked throughout the time periods to update their standards, and currently they're only certifying products and companies that do not contain PFAS or other what they call forever chemicals that are in many things that we use in our daily lives, like firefighting foam, lipstick, and dental floss. So BPI has figured out how to exclude those materials from their certification. So check out bpiworld.org, and you can look up the brands of materials that you're using now or that you'd like to use in the future to find out if those are truly compostable and safe to use. So like I said before, paper is accepted in these programs, including paper towels, napkins, cardboard, really dirty pizza boxes. As many of us on this webinar know, clean pizza boxes are accepted in recycling in Massachusetts and many other areas. But let's talk about that first bullet item just really briefly. So paper to go boxes, takeout boxes, paper plates, paper cups. There are a lot of great brands out there, and there are some brands that are not as great. And again, like I said, you can look up that website, BPI World, to find out if one of the products that you want to use for your takeout containers, which I know is a big thing for restaurants, is truly compostable. Similarly, if you go out to eat, yay, and come home with a takeout box, and you can look on it and see if it has a name, and you could look it up on this website to find out if it's truly compostable. Wood items such as bamboo, birch utensils, chopsticks, skewers, toothpicks, not the kind with plastic frills, and other newer types of toothpicks are available in compostable materials. Okay, so compostable plastic. I just got a call from a resident this morning about a compostable takeout container that was made from what looked like plastic. These materials are made from corn or polylactic acid, shortened to PLA. They're made to be composted in commercial composting, which is what we're talking about today, not for home composting. They won't break down, so don't waste your time. And then there are many events and restaurants that are now using clear compostable cold cups for beverages like beer. And those are readily compostable in a place like Martin's Farm because they shred everything up to 1/4-inch size. And those materials just melt away and compost into the piles. It's not as easy to compost these materials if you don't shred them first. So we need to figure out some more affordable shredders for smaller composters. There are utensils such as leading brands Green Wave and World Centric, but like I said, make sure they're always BPI certified. Now, if anyone wants more information on this, you can email me. My email will be at the end. And I have long dreamed of forming a collaborative purchasing group for events, schools, restaurants, businesses, I don't care who it is, towns, to be able to purchase this material, the right material that is really compostable and at a lower cost than they might be able to get online or someplace else. Now, there are a few good local vendors who are selling these materials, such as Mansfield Paper down in West Springfield. Baker's Office Supply in Greenfield has some compostables, and also WB Mason, which, as many people know, delivers. So does Mansfield Paper. So does Baker's. Everybody delivers, I guess. So if anyone wants more info, let me know. Okay, so here's our very own Rick Inez, who is on our call today on his phone. He was not able to join by video, but that's what he looks like. And now I'm going to talk about transfer station compost programs. Rick Inez from Clearview Composting currently services the New Salem, Orange, and Wendell transfer stations. And this is an example of one of the enclosures with compost barrels inside that is at those stations. And Rick is actually hoping to expand to more transfer stations. So look for some updates in the future. Triple T Trucking hauls to Martin's Farm from the transfer stations in Bernardston, Deerfield, Greenfield, Leverett, Northfield, and Whately. Whately was the first in the state to start a program like this in 2003. There are also free compost dumpsters for anyone to use. Wait a minute, they're not free. Greenfield might charge you $5 if you're from out of town, but you can bring materials in. So if you have an event going on, or a small business or any business-sized business, you could bring your materials, well sorted, of course, to one of these compost dumpsters or collections that is open to you or to members of your community. Now, Martin's Farm and Greenfield transfer stations do allow anyone to use their compost dumpsters, but you might want to call first just to make sure that they can handle the volume that you're going to be bringing in, and there are no surprises when you get there with your bag of food and paper waste. I want to highlight a really cool new initiative here in Greenfield. This is a compost cooperative. It's a cooperatively owned business, owned by several individuals in the region. It is a worker-owned co-op that is actually striving to provide jobs for the formerly incarcerated. And so they are reaching out to people who have come out of the Franklin County House of Corrections and seeing if it's a good fit for them to work with them. And they are expanding like crazy throughout the region. And they haul to Martin's Farm, Just Roots, and more compost facilities. They provide pails for smaller, like residential pickups, and toters for larger commercial size pickups. And they also service the Conway transfer station. So more haulers are emerging. And of course, we're not going to cover all of them here today. So go check out the website that Christy highlighted, recyclingworksma.com. And you can find more haulers that might service your area. Okay, let's talk about restaurants and the Shelburne Falls Compost Collaborative. We included these sorting bins because they're just wonderful, but these are just stock images. They're not actual examples, but I really like that one on the left especially. Those are Rubbermaid bins, by the way. You can find those online. Okay, so the Shelburne Falls Compost Collaborative. I was very pleased, one of the highlights of my entire career, to start this with the Greater Shelburne Falls Area Business Association and some other folks back in 2010. It's still going strong. It's comprised of 3 restaurants, currently an art school, and the Bridge of Flowers, the famous Bridge of Flowers, puts their garden waste in there. These organizations share a centrally located compost dumpster. The material is composted at Martin's Farm, and it's managed by my organization, the Franklin County Solid Waste District. So the restaurants that participate, I just want to give them a shout out. The first one to talk about is the Blue Rock, and this is a fabulous restaurant up on the hill in Shelburne Falls. And they have a pretty busy operation and takeout business during the pandemic. And with all this, they're the whole time still creating less than half a bag of trash a day. Great example of a restaurant that composts. That is all done by the staff. It's not a self-serve restaurant, obviously. West End Pub is a wonderful destination in Shelburne Falls. They're right at the Bridge of Flowers, and it's a tiny, tiny restaurant. It's amazing what they do there. This picture in the corner is their tiny little closet of a busing area, and they've managed to carve out a little bin here or space for everything. So they've got their dishes, dish bus bucket, utensil soak, compost, food and paper, including napkins, and then recycling for bottles, cans, and containers. And that is used by the staff. The third restaurant that's a major participant here at this time in this compost collaborative is Hearty Eats. This is sort of not self-serve, but you go up and order your food at a counter, you go and sit down, they bring you the food when it's ready, and then you bus your own table. That's during normal times. I don't know what they're doing now, so don't quote me on that, but this is their long-term operations. So front of house, they have this busing area. Like I said, it's self-serve. On the top here, they've got dishes, silverware. On the bottom, it says compost, no silverware or white dishes. Those are the reusable dishes. And then it says napkins, food waste, etc. Then at the top here is the tiny little trash can. Look what that is. It's one of those 1-quart bins that you'd put in your salad bar for the tomatoes or the onions. And that's the only trash receptacle they have, because everything that they serve on is reusable and washable or compostable. They're not using anything in their restaurant that could be trash, except for maybe a tea bag with like a foil lining. So any trash that ends up in that bin is usually like from people's pockets or a candy or a gum or something that they have. So that's one strategy to get it to the front of house. Now this is sort of self-serve. Let's look at a fancier restaurant. So Hope and Olive is not part of the Shelburne Falls Compost Collaborative. So that's separate and over now. Thank you very much to them. Hope and Olive is a fabulous restaurant in downtown Greenfield. These are not very pretty pictures of the back of house operations. So thank you to them for letting us use this. That is the dish area on the left. So they've got the dishes waiting to go through the dishwasher. The staff scrapes plates, etc., into the white food bin. And then I believe that food bin is small enough to go through the dishwasher, which is a real bonus. Same thing with the pig buckets for Gardner Ale House. Those can go through a dishwasher. So that's a really important specification in, a compost bin. How are you going to wash it? Is it small enough to go through your dishwasher? So that's the white bucket. I think the gray bucket might just be for trash, but I can't remember the exact details on that. So this is the way back of the house for Hope and Olive. In the very rear of this photo, we have a small trash dumpster. The next trash dumpster down is actually for cardboard. And then the 3 toters in the foreground are for food waste and paper waste, such as napkins and paper towels. And that goes to Martin's Farm. Now, some eateries are able to combine cardboard and food waste. So like you'd get a larger dumpster for just all organics. You'd put all your cardboard, all your paper, newspapers, office papers even, and food waste, and that could go to a facility such as Martin's Farm. So ask your hauler if they can do that. That's a really good way to save space, okay? Really briefly, the Shea Theater in Turner's Falls, now Compost, although they've been closed for a while. They are a town-owned building with a nonprofit board of directors, and the citizen organization Drawdown Montague has really helped them to get up and running with composting, including self-hauling, volunteers putting bags of compostables into their personal vehicles and bringing to a nearby school with a compost dumpster. Now the town has a compost dumpster, as we saw in a previous photo. So we're in a much better place for that when they do reopen, and they could also get a hauler to come and pick up that material. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the events around this county are all composting. The Green River Festival is one of the more notable ones. That's a national acts, large scale music festival. They require their vendors to use compostable tableware. And so everything that is served at this festival is compostable or recyclable. So they've been able to really reduce trash. And this is a little bit old. A couple of years ago, they diverted 63% of the waste from the festival from the trash. So 63% was recycled or composted. And this is a close-up of our bins in the upper right corner that we loan those to them. And we loan those bins to 45 events a year, by the way. It's a lot of work. We couldn't be the Greater Quabbin Food Alliance without talking about one of our wonderful leaders in the region. The North Quabbin Garlic and Arts Festival has been a zero waste leader for events for many, many years. And they famously only create 2 bags of trash after every festival. Everything else is either reduced, not used, composted, or recycled. Most of the material is composted at Clearview Composting, our very own Rick Inez. And again, they work with the vendors to encourage compostable tableware. They actually require it. And they actually sell the vendors. If the vendors want to buy from them, they will sell them the proper materials. Otherwise, they can use another type, but they do have to use it for a great, great result. Lastly, the Franklin County Fair is a big, sort of uncontrollable, wonderful event. It's a traditional fair. And I started that compost and recycle program 10 to 15 years ago, and it's been evolving ever since. And so we're doing pretty good. We always need volunteers. And this is an example, this picture of the waste stations that we've created there. So without further ado, oh, and also there's my email address. So email me if you have any questions. I'm going to turn it back over to Rick to give us some information about how he's been able to assist his customers in reducing waste. Rick?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I will try to keep this fairly brief. I imagine we might be running a little long now, but anyway.
Actually, we're remarkably on time. So you have your full,
oh, good.
like 4.5 minutes.
But I only had 5 minutes for this anyway, so
Yep.
I'll keep it brief. I just want to give people an overview, and the main thing I want to convey to anybody who's following this or will see it on YouTube later or whatever is that the whole philosophy of Clearview Composting in terms of serving residential and commercial customers is to customize our service to fit the needs of the individual customers. We don't believe in a one-size-fits-all model. It needs to work for the individual customer. It's just like anything else with recycling over the years. if it can be turned into a routine that is no problem for everybody who has to deal with it, then it works. And if it can't, then there are going to be problems. And so our whole philosophy is let's make sure there are no problems. So I just wanted to give quickly a few examples of what we do. And actually, I'll close probably with a couple of new initiatives that we're going to be launching very soon. But I'll start with what we are already doing. We, as has been alluded to, Amy mentioned it, we currently serve 3 municipal transfer stations with what is this essentially residential food waste collection. We also have another municipal customer in the case of the Swift River School in New Salem, and we have one main commercial customer right now, the Quabbin Harvest Co-op in Orange. And in each case, what we've done is we've started with a sort of a basic model in mind in terms of how we were going to provide the service, but we have adjusted it in each case to make it work as best we can for each customer. And I want to talk just a tiny bit more about that, how that customizing works, and then give you some specific examples of what it means to the customers in terms of, in some cases, outright cost savings. In other cases, maybe not very big savings, but pricing that is very, very competitive with what their cost would be to dispose of the material as trash. So basically, when we offer service to people, we need to have a way, obviously, to collect the materials. Usually, those are 20-gallon bins that we stage in an outside an enclosure that we build, but it's outside of any building or anything. The enclosure is a wooden structure that's just designed to make the bins inaccessible so that there will be no animals getting at them and causing a mess. And we do that for all our customers where it's appropriate. We also offer, in the case of Quabbin Harvest Co-op in particular, we offer a customization of that to include 1 or 2 smaller interior bins that they use for accumulating materials from their operation and then carrying them outside to the bins that are actually picked up. So basically, we customize as we need to. We have been known, in fact, to change the specifications of the containers that are being used for the collection when it suited the needs of the customer. And an example there is the Swift River School, which was finding that, believe it or not, their children were having trouble hitting the round 20-gallon bins that we were providing in terms of dumping food waste, and they were getting too much spillage. So we switched to using square 28-gallon bins, which apparently the kids had an easier time hitting. So we do that kind of thing because we are very committed to working with our customers and making the whole program work. One of the other things I should mention about the service we offer that is not available from all of our competition necessarily is that because of how we handle materials, we are able to provide customers with a lot more detailed information on both the weight and the volume of materials that we have collected from them. This is often one of the big challenges in designing waste diversion programs, is that many customers have not ever had occasion to need to document how much food waste exactly they're getting, whether by weight or volume. We obviously, in working with customers, we encourage them to start us off with whatever information they have. But in the worst case, we can start a program for a customer and generate actual data for them, which can then be used to refine the program and also, obviously, to document what's happening with cost savings, which we always are trying to generate anyway. Sticking with the cost savings thing, I just want to mention that in our years of work with the Swift River School, we have pretty convincingly generated substantial savings, cost savings from them. For them, when we started, they were getting a trash dumpster picked up 4 times a month, and they were out, as they say, in the boondocks. So it was not a cheap pickup. They are now reduced to, I believe, the last I knew anyway, no more than 2 pickups a month. And although we charge them both a processing cost for the food waste and a pickup charge, the combined total of what we charge them is so much less than what they were paying that, number one, they keep urging me to increase my prices. But number two, thankfully, they have school gardens, and every couple of years they plow some of the savings back into buying finished compost from us to put in their gardens, which is a nice closing of the loop, I think, in terms of letting the kids know how that whole process works. So that's an example. Another example I wanted to mention in terms of how things get customized, going back to the Quabbin Harvest Co-op, we've been working with them for years. I was an original customer of theirs, and I'm now a current member of their board of directors, so I have an extra motivation there. But our service to them has shown a couple of interesting manifestations of what we referred to earlier of the food waste hierarchy. We're there to take away food waste, but Quabbin Harvest has 2 things going on, one deliberate and one less so, that are actually diverting the food waste from us getting it, I have to say, some of the time. But they're diverting it to things that are higher on that hierarchy. 2 examples. One of the great features, for those of you who don't know it, of Quabbin Harvest is what's called Nalini's Kitchen, which is a fabulous way to get nicely cooked meals of all types. But one of the things that Nalini specializes in is diverting so-called ugly produce, stuff that doesn't sell well because it doesn't look like it's any good, but which is perfectly sound to cook. And she diverts a lot of what they get, of that type, into her offerings each week, which of course reduces the amount that Clearview Composting gets, but we're totally okay with that. The other interesting diversion further up on the hierarchy, as I said, this example that I just gave is feeding humans. The other thing that happens is that unpredictably, food waste gets diverted out of our collection bins at the co-op, and it turns out it is being taken by members of the co-op who own animals that they can feed it to. Whether they be chickens or ducks or pigs or whatever.
Hey, Rick, we've got to wrap up.
So
Sorry, this is Joel. Yeah.
Excuse me?
We've got to wrap up to get to the Q&A.
Okay.
We're losing people.
I'm like 1 sentence away. So I was just going to say that's an example of how the hierarchy works. Sometimes it works formally, and sometimes it works informally, and you know, we appreciate that hierarchy and are therefore willing to work with the co-op, even though it produces unpredictability for us. So anyway, that's enough for now.
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you everybody for your helpful slides and information on this. We're going to quick jump in with some Q&A. I know we've lost some people here who had some of the questions, but I think they're still really valuable questions. I guess we'll just jump in with that. I'm actually going to launch this last poll before we, or as we get that going. So if you can answer those questions if you're still on here about your current food waste processing at your business or at wherever whatever your operation is. And
Joel, I think we were gonna skip this one and do the last one. The one that's showing is the donation one.
sounds good.
Sorry, folks, skip that one. This one.
And as we're doing that, I guess we can start off with one of the best first questions. And if you want, if you have a question, actually, if you're still on, we'll start with that. Feel free to unmute yourself and turn your video on and ask a question if you have one. So I'll give you a second to do that. And yeah, go ahead and fire away if you've got a question, and then I'll answer the ones that came up in the chat. Looks like everyone who answered the poll is all set for now. I know we had a few other people reach out. So I'll start with this first question. What is the best way for a business to expand from back of the house kitchen composting to broader dining office area recycling while controlling for contamination?
I'd love to start that one off if that's all right with everyone.
Go for it.
The easiest is to just make it possible for people to do it, which might sound a little simple, but the point being, if you already have that system in place, you're already 90% of the way there. All you need for the next step is clear direction for people about what needs to go where. So if you're already doing back of house collection, and you want to add, the easiest thing to add first is anything coming back from front of house. So if you have a full service restaurant, any plates that your staff are clearing, if they have a bin, like Amy was showing in her examples near the dish station, and this is how it's been in restaurants where I've worked as well, you just scrape it, instead of scraping it, you're scraping it either way. Instead of scraping it into the trash, you just scrape it into the compost bin. The challenge with that, and this was the contamination question, is that there are things that sometimes need to be picked out. The wrapper for the little butter pats, or like we're saying, tea bag wrappers, or other trash that customers have left on the table that didn't come from you, perhaps. But as long as you then have a small trash can and a big compost bin and clear direction for your staff, that can usually go fairly smoothly. There usually needs to be some feedback there too. So if you are getting contamination, reiterating with your staff, figuring out sort of where the sticking points are, what's making it hard for this to work the way it's supposed to work. And then if you have a limited service restaurant and you have areas where customers are clearing their own dishes and everything, then having as much as possible that is in your restaurant be compostable, again, as some of those examples that Amy showed, then again, they're scraping, they're still going to be scraping one way or another. It's just which materials are going into which bins, and if that's going into a compost bin versus going into a trash bin. That does get a little bit trickier. There definitely are higher levels of contamination if you have customer action, front of house food waste collection. Another system that I've seen work really, really well at small cafes, for example, is that they just have bus tubs out in the front of house area, and customers put everything in the one bus tub and then staff separate it out. And that's a way to have a little bit more control on all of those little occasional bits of trash that you don't want to contaminate your compost. That can work really well.
Can I just add, that's really great. Can I just add a couple little things? Signage is really important, and Christy showed some beautiful signage that Recycling Works is able to provide and customize for your organization. And as you saw in the picture I showed, they just use words, which pictures are even more effective, but it looks nice and neat the way they did the words at the Hearty Eats restaurant. And then I also didn't mention that on the compostable tableware, there are compostable portion cups, 2 and 4 ounces with the lid. So that's something that I think restaurants struggle with is, well, what about our cheap little plastic salad dressing on the side cup? Well, there is a compostable option. And of course you can use washable too.
And note that even if you have the plastic one that has the recycling symbol on the bottom, they're too small for most of our our conventional single stream recycling programs. So even though you think the little ramekin, the little portion cup is recyclable, when it's plastic versus compostable ware, it is not. So it still needs to go in the trash anyway.
That's right.
Little factoid. It's a bummer.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Didn't know that. Good to know.
If it's smaller than a credit card or it's smaller than your fist.
Smaller than the heart that you make, it goes in the trash.
Oh, that's a good one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Here's a question that I might take a crack at is if all the food waste in Massachusetts was composted, would there be adequate capacity to cost effectively use that compost in a state on a long-term basis, particularly in Eastern Massachusetts?
Yes.
And I think just quick, I want to have your thoughts on that too, but as someone who works with landowners to improve their soil and works with farmers to improve their soil, there's definitely, a lot of applications for compost and a lot of ways to use it. And, it's really one of the more valuable, resources we have for gardening and agriculture. So Amy or Christy, you have things to say, it sounds like too. And I bet that Mike, the farmer on, has something to say about that too.
Well, and actually, Joel, I want to ask you, can you imagine a situation where it's likely to be feasible that you might add too much compost to soil,
well,
reasonably speaking?
Yes. I've seen some urban farms that have too high of a ratio and it becomes a little bit hydrophobic. That can be an issue, but I'm curious to see if Mike Pino, I see you're unmuted, you're a farmer. Is there ever too much compost? He's a vegetable farmer in Sterling.
Now with the heavy soils we've got so far, I've been putting 400 to 500 tons of compost down every year, no matter what, and it's not enough.
That's a lot.
See, there's a lot of composting, especially for vegetable farming, right?
Right now, every hay farmer in the county would love to get a hold of it. There's no more cow manure.
Yep.
All of our fields are getting depleted of organic matter. We got to spread something on them.
Yep.
But I think the clear answer there then to answer, and I know Susan had to leave us, but it sounds like we have tremendous capacity before that becomes a limiting factor.
Yep. And the Healthy Soils Action Plan for Massachusetts, which is recently becoming public, talks about that need to try to increase organic matter in the soil throughout the state in all sorts of different contexts, especially in agriculture, but also in lawns and fields. And, compost is really one of the quickest ways to do that because it's ready to go organic matter. And then she also asked, and we can follow up with her and others on these, but is digestate ever easier or harder to find a stable end use for?
From the resulting
aerobic
material
digester.
from anaerobic digestion?
Yeah.
Rick, do you have a comment on that?
Well, this is an area that I haven't gotten around to exploring yet because there are only a limited number of digesters so far in Massachusetts, and none of them is really very close to orange. So I haven't really pursued it, but I've read in the literature that the digestate is very compostable, which makes good sense really. So I'm assuming that the stuff that's being produced so far by the existing digesters is finding a home somewhere, and if there are more digesters come into being, then there will be more of that material to be spread throughout the composting community. One thing I forgot to mention earlier when I was talking about the hierarchy on the question of the digesters is that what I understand anyway, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this, but what I understand is that the digesters that we have in Massachusetts right now are mostly focused on receiving very focused streams of material with very predictable characteristics. So stuff that's coming out of large-scale food waste processing, for instance, and not so much this kind of stuff that Clearview takes, which is coming out of individual homes and individual small businesses and so on, which is much more variable. So it's always seemed to me that anaerobic digestion and composting can coexist very well based on all of these facts. There's a place for both to be part of the solution.
One thing to add to that, Rick, is that the anaerobic digesters that are on the farms, like in Hadley, Barstow's farm, and in Deerfield, there's Barway's farm, not related, but similar name. I believe they use the resulting compost right on their own fields. And it's just cow manure and food waste. The digesters that are used in eastern part of Massachusetts, like at Deer Island, have more food waste from the municipalities, and it also has, doesn't it have sludge?
Yeah, human waste
in it also. So
well,
I don't know if that
Deer Island would certainly have sludge. Yeah.
I can speak to the one on Jordan Dairy Farm. I work a lot with them. Most of their, a lot of their digestate is used on site, and they actually, you know, because they do no-till practices of agriculture, they actually use slit the soil. So it's a slight disturbance, but not full tillage. And when they spread that digestate out on the field, because it's almost the issue with digestate versus compost is it's mostly liquid,
and it
because you're burned off, and it stinks.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's
yeah.
They're heading to regulations relative to the use of the digestate in having to impregnate the soil rather than spread on top because of the open.
Right.
You go to Rutland, you used to smell it all the time. You used to smell it from the center of Princeton to Petersham when they were spreading. Now they're injecting it and the smell is negligible. It's hardly there.
Good.
Yep.
Isn't it wonderful the way that things can evolve and get better with time?
Oh, and it didn't take that much time to get it changed.
Yeah, and smart people working together to fix problems. It just it goes back to what Rick always says, you don't have to start out composting perfectly. You can start step by step, a little bit at a time, and make improvements as you go. And before you know it, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point too with the waste. So the sludge, the human waste sludge. So for anyone who doesn't know, that's coming from wastewater treatment plants. So anaerobic digestion is a technology that's been used quite a lot in wastewater treatment plants. And they are also starting to accept food waste a little bit more. I was on a webinar recently where some folks in California were talking about their systems. And so that's another additive potential outlet for food waste material to go into those, because it makes those a little bit more balanced in terms of their chemistry, is what I learned from that webinar. So it's pretty cool. Lots of options.
Definitely that they need, you need to have a certain amount of food waste for the digestion to work well. You can't just have cow manure in there, which is interesting, or sludge. So it's a good. We need more people doing, sending food waste to these facilities.
Yeah.
We got to keep mindful of the opponents of composting as well. Oh, this guy.
Yeah.
I'll call you
So
back.
just to, well, go ahead, Mike. You were
Yeah.
saying.
I got rid of my hope. No, Harriet Chandler and her whole group, after all that went down to at Davidians and Northborough with the issues, when we get to the State House and what's going on there with composting and all the bureaucracy now, it's become a headache for farmers, and the regulatory process is going crazy. I can't bring any inbound product here. It can only compost produced on farm without going through a headache of licensure, and most of my property is rented or family owned, so I don't have direct control, so I can't get a permit.
That compost site technical assistance for the Recycling Works program offers, it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, is for people in your situation to try to help facilitate the process in whatever way we can. So if I'm understanding it, you currently compost your own material and you're interested in accepting food waste from offsite to balance your material, but are not able to get the license to do so?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
It's, you know, it's hoops and headaches. I've been composting since I was 7 years old, and my product doesn't smell. I don't have issues, but I got to go through all these hoops because somebody that lived next door to a farm that's been there for umpteen years complained and stirred it up so bad that it caused an act in Congress.
Right.
It's ludicrous, and that it had to go that far. And yet here we are, focused on reducing all this waste in the system, and we've got somebody swinging a bat at us already.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Lots of facets for sure.
Yeah.
Should we take the one last question, or should we just end it here?
Let's do it. We have a couple more minutes before 4.
Okay, so the question was, what are your thoughts on a municipality mandating composting for business, even smaller businesses that would not be subject to the waste ban established by DEP? Have any municipalities done this? Maybe that's a question for Amy.
I don't know of any that have done that. I think the only municipality that has mandated composting at all is Hamilton on the North Shore, which was one of the first curbside, or if not the first curbside municipal compost program in the state. Whately was the first drop off, but I guess we were before Hamilton, so we were the first. But anyway, I mean, a municipality could put something like that in their bylaws, but I bet you get a lot of people saying, well, this isn't very friendly to businesses. So, I mean, it's a good question. Christy, do you have any insight on that one?
I am not, my knowledge of the various towns in Massachusetts and what they're all doing is not nearly as broad as yours, but my sense is, so bans are tricky. And like I was saying, I am proud to say that that it seems like the DEP in creating their bans have done so in a way that, well, I've done a lot of work with zoning for other topics in my professional history, and the gist of it is you never want to create a law that people can't follow. So it's really tricky to create a ban and cover all of the nuances of the scenario. So I think that it certainly is possible, and we're starting to see a lot of bans related to other waste materials. The plastic bag bans that are popping up everywhere, of course, are ones that people have probably heard about. And they can be better or worse depending on the nature of the businesses in that town, the nature of the details for how the ban is orchestrated or worded. In the case of Massachusetts versus some other surrounding states where, by the way, we also do, we as CET, we do food waste work nationwide as part of our Wasted Food Solutions resource. So we also offer free technical assistance for businesses in Rhode Island and Connecticut, New York, We're working with Maryland, California, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and I think Ohio. We have a big project going on in Ohio right now. Different states handle those differently. Here in Massachusetts, our bans are regulations, they're not laws. In other states, they're laws, or they handle it some other way. So it just changes the way that they function. But like with everything political, you know, the end result is what ultimately then ends up happening with that particular goal, what the goal is and whether or not you get there. So I guess that's the long way of saying I think it's possible, but I think it would need to be done carefully. And you would want to be sure that you have the infrastructure in place first. So if you're going to do that as a municipal manager, I would make sure, you know, as all the programs that Amy's been working on, that maybe you have a municipal composting program available before you require that everybody adheres to it, for example.
That's what's happening in Sterling right now. They're starting to develop a program, and they want to reduce the cost of solid waste. We're up to close to $1 million in expense as a town, and they think they can reduce by 40%. And then they're talking about making the restaurants join, start moving all of their waste.
Right, and it's all related to that bigger issue that, like Rick was saying in our intro, the sort of the overview, that we're running out of trash space. Food material is one thing that is relatively easily diverted to not trash, and so the state and various cities are saying, okay, our trash expenses are really getting really high. What can we do about this? And this is one sort of somewhat clear answer for sure.
Yeah, and food waste is, you know, heavy, wet, dense,
stinky, messy.
Stinky.
Yep.
We can get that out of our trash. I mean, in my household and in many businesses, like the Blue Rock that I talked about, what's in their trash? It's just basically like plastic wrappings. And, you know, we can recycle plastic bags. I bet they have a plastic bag recycling area because they're so good about that. But there's plastic that packages foods that is not recyclable. And that's pretty much all that is in your trash.
Chip bag.
Recycle and compost. Yeah, the chip bags.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Promote your Tupperware.
What?
Promote Tupperware.
Yeah,
Right.
Definitely. Reusables.
There are a lot of fantastic reusable to-go container programs that are just starting up, which that's a different set of materials, but
Right.
I'd be happy to talk to anybody about those. It's a great idea. It works really, really well, for example, or it has the potential to on college campuses where the material that's going out of the dining hall isn't going very far.
Right.
So.
And they could just bring it back to be
Bring it
washed.
right back. Yep, exactly.
But
Yeah,
then
I
we've
just
got
want to piggyback one little thing about the question about mandating composting. Municipalities can mandate that recycling be offered by every hauler that comes into that town
Sure.
and does business. So they can say, if you're going to do business in our town, you got to offer recycling and actually recycle it. So that there is a precedent for that could be used for composting too. When, not if, we get to that point that composting is readily available everywhere or in a particular town. We could do that in Greenfield. We certainly have a lot of options. I just don't know. I doubt the political will is there to make that happen, but you never know. We did ban styrofoam in this town. Not me, not we, they.
If I could, I would just add one more thought on this whole question of appropriate local action, and that is that in the current environment, mandating composting diversion is probably not realistic, but it's possible for local policy to strongly encourage things, even if they're not mandating them. And I think we're at the point maybe where strongly encouraging people to look for ways to move in that direction is the best choice.
Yeah.
And maybe in a few years, when we have more capacity in place and it's a more realistic option for it to be mandatory, maybe it won't have to be mandatory. Maybe everybody will have adopted it by then. Who knows? So,
Yeah, well, maybe the state will keep making that threshold go down. So we went from a ton a week in 2014 to half ton a week mandatory composting. If you make a half ton a week or more, you have to compost, and that
Yeah.
will go into effect in the fall. Christy, is that really going to happen?
That's the, I believe, I don't remember the exact timeline, but I believe it was sometime this year that was going to be going into effect for that half ton threshold.
Yeah, so that's going to
So the
open
state,
up a whole
the
bunch
argument
of,
for doing it at the state level is that at least you're applying the same rules to a lot of people as opposed to town by town. You're sort of saying, if your restaurant is on our side of the border, you're stuck with this, and if you're on the other side of the border, you're not. And you know, it gets tougher. Which is why I'm thinking maybe at the moment strongly encouraging as opposed to mandating is the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's all kinds of, I mean, there are really creative ways to approach stuff like this from a management perspective, either within any given business to from a town looking at the businesses in their town. You know, if there wanted to be some sort of creative competition for who can reduce their waste amounts the most, and everybody who's participating is keeping track, and you know, make a fun thing out of it, or within a business, you know, fun incentives or rewards for staff being super accurate with what goes in which bins, or who knows, you know. But there are ways to be kind of creative and fun about it too, rather than just big stick all the time.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we're at a good point to stop the Q&A here, and appreciate everybody's helpful thoughts and the discussion. And thank you, Mike, for participating as well, and to everyone else who participated. And we'll make this available on YouTube.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
we'll email you.
Yeah.
Yep,
Thank you.
we'll be in touch. All right.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.